US President Joe Biden has pressed Israel's Prime Minister to call a ceasefire in the conflict with Palestinian militants. Mr Biden spoke with Benjamin Netanyahu and indicated he'd keep working towards brokering a halt to hostilities. Correspondent Greg Jennett joins us now from Washington. Greg, g'day. So is this the strongest position that Joe Biden has taken so far on a ceasefire?
Morning, Joe. Yes, it is subtle but potentially significant that the White House is now using the word ceasefire. That word apparently conveyed directly in his conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, only about 24 hours ago, we were telling you in our reporting on discussions at the UN Security Council in New York that the US was holding back on signing up to some sort of joint statement that would call for just such an outcome in the Middle East conflict, that is a ceasefire. Why? Because the Biden administration has preferred to engage in what it calls quote unquote intensive diplomacy. So this has involved Joe Biden making phone calls to Mahmoud Abbas and also to Prime Minister Netanyahu. You also have Secretary of State Tony Blinken making many calls, and we're told Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, doing much the same. But today it did fall to President Biden to pick up the phone again and have another conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu. And we might dive into the exact wording, or some of it at least, that's given in what's called the official readout from the White House. So let's go through that. The two leaders, we're told, discussed progress in Israel's military operations against Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza. The president expressed his support for a ceasefire and discussed US engagement with Egypt and other partners towards that end. The two leaders, it says, agreed that they and their teams would remain in close touch. So that is an indication publicly now that a press has been made by Joe Biden to Benjamin Netanyahu, while also stressing, it must be said, their right to self-defense and calling for a calm from the other side as well, the Hamas side. But it is an indication, I think, of the public escalation of pressure here, Joe, because we can also report that members of the president's own Democratic Party on Capitol Hill are also getting a little agitated and saying, in effect, in written letters, come on, we need to do better than just quiet diplomacy here. We need to be calling for just this thing, a ceasefire. And so it seems Joe Biden has done that himself out of his own mouth in that discussion with Prime Minister Netanyahu.
And Greg, on another issue, there's a lot of discussion about the vaccine rollout here in Australia. Tell us where it's up to in the US.
Yes, vaccine diplomacy is being waged by Joe Biden on an altogether different front here. So the US manufacturers of vaccines, at least initially, were not allowed to export their products from US factories, but that is now being switched up by Joe Biden. We're looking at a situation now where the entire US eligible vaccine population, so that'll be everyone from 12 upwards, is more than amply covered by supplies that have been secured by the US government. That's Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. That leaves the possibility now for the US to open its cupboard to the rest of the world. It had already, by the way, pledged open access to the 60 million AstraZeneca doses that were made here, simply because AstraZeneca has not yet been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for emergency use. So there's the 60 million there, and now Joe Biden has told the world another 20 million from those other vaccine products I've already mentioned will be made available to the rest of the world. And sounding somewhat competitive about all of this, this is how Joe Biden announced that globally.
This will be more vaccines than any country has actually shared to date. 5 times more than any other country. More than Russia, China, which have donated 15 million doses. You know, there's a lot of talk about Russia and China influencing the world with vaccines. We want to lead the world with our values, with this demonstration of our innovation and ingenuity and the fundamental decency of the American people.
So 80 million doses on offer coming out of US factories. Joe Biden's indicating that he'll have more to say when he gets to the G7 summit next month in the UK, and also, Joe, that the carve-up of all of these doses will be moderated through the COVAX group of countries.
And Greg, so you mentioned there that there's enough stock in the US now to cover people who want to get vaccinated. Are they being clear about what percentage of the adult population or eligible population has actually been fully vaccinated so far?
Yes, good question, Joe. We're about to get an official update as early as tomorrow on the latest weekly figures, but Joe Biden dropped a very public hint today that he already knows that data. I'll just backtrack a little before giving you that latest figure that the president conveyed, but just to set this in context, he has publicly stated his next goal. That's a goal that is tethered to Independence Day on the 4th of July. This is the date by which he wants to see 70% of the adult population. So this is leaving out the latest group of adolescents who've been added to the free public vaccination scheme. 70% covered by at least one shot on Independence Day. Now, what did the president tell us today? Well, he tells us that the number is tracking pretty much on 60% coverage so far. So that becomes a pretty good indication that he's going to achieve this next goal as well come the month of July. So still, what are we saying, about 5 or 6 weeks to go to get there. And if you're at 60%, that's not a bad benchmark heading towards that figure.
Yeah, interesting to hear how they're going in the US with the rollout there. Okay, Greg Jennett reporting there from Washington.